is right, and this is the right moment to do it. If he's wrong, there'll be no shortage of people queuing up to tell him.
Thanks, Gary. Well, now joining us from Birmingham is Labour's Work and Pensions spokeswoman Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
You do talk about cutting the deficit every year until they balance the books, till you balance the books. But how long is that?
Well, in every year of the next Parliament, we're going to cut the deficit till we get the current budget into surplus and until debt is falling as a share of GDP. We hope that we can do that quickly, but it depends on how fast the economy grows and whether wages grow so that we have that tax revenue coming in and so we're paying less out in social security. But we are determined to finish the job that this government have not managed to do, and that is to get the current budget into surplus and to get our national debt falling. You
see, the curious thing is that when Ed Miliband stood up at the Labour conference, the deficit was nowhere to be seen. And when I spoke to him the following day, the deficit still didn't figure in any of his answers. And one wonders why now, 3 weeks before the vote, you're suddenly talking about the deficit.
Well, for the last 5 years, we've been working on policies for this general election, and Ed Miliband has always been very clear that we were not allowed to put forward anything that was not fully funded, and that's why the manifesto today is really important, because people can be confident that everything that we say we're going to do, we also say how we're going to pay for it, whether it's on the National Health Service, childcare, getting young people back to work. All of our commitments are fully costed and fully funded.
Well, you say that, but it all depends on how well you do. And if you do very well, you say you will have to cut less. If you don't do very well, you'll have to cut more. But you don't actually say what you're going to cut anyway.
Well, if you take my area, for example, in work and pensions, we have made some tough choices. We've said, for example, that we would sign up to an overall cap in social security spending, a household benefit cap, that pensioners earning more than £42,000 a year in retirement income wouldn't get winter fuel allowance, and that child benefit will only go up by 1% a year for the first 2 years of the next Parliament. So we have set out, department by department, some of the things that we would do to get the deficit down. And of course we've also put forward some targeted tax increases, whether that's a tax on properties worth more than £2 million or a repeat of the bank bonus tax or an increase in the bank levy, all things that we need to do if we are serious about reducing that deficit and getting our budget back in balance.
You see, I think a lot of people looking in are wondering which party they're listening to. There really is a question about whether actually anybody is being offered a choice, because a series of figures are being thrown out by each of the three major parties, well, even UKIP as well, and it's very hard for anyone to see whether any of them stack up. And even the Institute for Fiscal Studies says today, your figures are vague.
Well, there are big differences, and we obviously haven't seen the other manifestos yet, between what the parties are offering, whether that's increase in the national minimum wage or banning exploitative zero-hour contracts, but also big differences on whether parties are going to fund the things that they put in their manifesto. And we'll see the Conservatives' manifesto tomorrow, but so far they've given £20 billion worth of either tax cuts or spending increases without saying where a penny of that money is going to come from. And the reality is you can't fund our National Health Service on an IOU. If you're serious about investing in the extra doctors and nurses that we need to reduce waiting times, to ensure that everyone can get a GP appointment, to ensure that new mums get a midwife dedicated to their care, you've got to say where that money is going to come from. We've been clear on that, right, by taxing properties worth more than £2 million, by a levy on the tobacco companies, by cracking down on tax avoidance. We can fund that commitment.
But you'll accept that this cascade of figures and the rest of it is very hard for people to follow. Let me just turn to the question of Ed Miliband himself. He kept saying today, I am ready. Well, if he's not ready, he shouldn't be running. I mean, does he try to convince himself or us?
Well, he's putting himself forward for the toughest job in the country, and he was making some binding promises today with the British public, saying that what he would do if he is Prime Minister in 3.5 weeks' time. And he is making those commitments to people, and he is assuring people that we have those fully funded, fully costed policies that are going to make a big difference to people's lives, whether it's banning exploitative zero-hour contracts, whether it's offering mums and dads those childcare places. Ed is ready for that job. I've had the privilege of working with him for the last 4.5 years. He's up for that challenge.
Right.
He knows where his values are. He's ready to be our Prime Minister.
Rachel Reeves, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, something which